and welcome to the Strike Show. I'm your host, Sean Hartnett. Joining me as ever is sound fondler Michael Chubb.
Hello.
Let's dive straight in with the stories. We have a story coming out of the local.se, which is, I guess, a Swedish probably. It says 6 in 10 jobless will be foreigners by 2017. That's fairly dire statistic right there. It says the agency released the figures as part of its labour market forecast for 2016 to 2017. It suggested that unemployment was set to decline between Swedish-born citizens aged between 15 and 64 from 7.5% in 2015 to around 6.6%. However, it said it expected the jobless rate for foreigners would rise. A total of 21.8% of foreign-born citizens are currently unemployed, figures from Sweden's employment agency showed last month. This means that around 50% of unemployed people in Sweden are originally from abroad. The agency's latest research suggests that this is set to rise to 60% by 2017. Yeah, I mean, it kind of just hammers home every criticism that the right has about migrants in general. Like when they say, oh, they're uneducated, they come over here and there's not enough jobs for us, let alone more people and stuff. And then the left always kind of rebuffs that as like, oh, that's racist. It's not really. It's statistically backed up. It's not like at a certain point, you must realize that in order to govern the world, even in compartmentalized bits like countries and stuff like that, you have to generalize a little. You have to kind of say, oh, wait, well, these people aren't that educated, or these people aren't as educated as these people. I mean, if you just consider everyone equal in every single way, then the world wouldn't function, because you would have doctors coming from the Middle East who have had sweet fuck all training coming over here and trying to get jobs as doctors, and then you being a racist for expecting to hold them up to the same standards that are here in the West when it comes to qualifications, when it comes to, experience and things like that, which does happen a shitload. You're always hearing about them. There's always stories about how like unqualified people coming from over here and or coming from somewhere else and coming over here and doing a shitty job at it. And it often comes up after the fact. It often comes after they've botched some surgery that is piss easy, or they've made some wildly inaccurate diagnosis or something like that. It's always a bit too late. You need these kinds of strict sort of laws, and you need ultimately these generalizations. There's no smoke without fire. At a certain point, you can't blame everything on racism. You can't say the Swedish are being racist for not employing 60% of foreigners. Maybe there's just a kind of common denominator here. Maybe they're not that educated, or at least not educated enough to do the job. Maybe they're, whatever the generalization is. I just think ignoring it or denying it or whatever is very, I don't know, I think it worsens the problem, to be honest. You need to acknowledge these kinds of things. So yeah, 60%. We have, speaking of Middle Easterners, we have women in Saudi Arabia were allowed to vote for the first time this year. Last week it said that the Saudi Arabian women were allowed to vote on Saturday in an unprecedented municipal election in which women cast the first ballot for the first time. Women are they're allowed to stand as candidates, right? Get this, despite the fiercely conservative kingdom being the only nation where women are not allowed to drive. So I guess, go them, although 2015 is about fucking time. But this story kind of caught my eye for a few different reasons. It said a total of 978 women have registered as candidates alongside 5,938 men. Get this bit. Female candidates have had to speak behind a partition during campaign appearances or be represented by a man. We have 130,000 women registered to vote, officials say, but that figure still falls short of male voter registration, which stands at 1.35 million. Yeah, it's to be honest, do the elections really matter in these countries? I mean, not only are they run by a corrupt monarchy and corrupt government, but listen to this. Elections themselves are a rare thing in the Saudi kingdom. Saturday will be only the third time in history that Saudis have gone to the polls. There were no elections in the 40 years between 1965 and 2005. Yeah, it says the decision to allow women to take part was taken by the late King Abdullah and is seen as a key part of his legacy. I love this explanation by him as to why he did this. In announcing the reforms, King Abdullah said women in Saudi Arabia have demonstrated positions that have expressed correct opinions and advice. They have expressed it, yeah. They've agreed with me. They've said that the monarchy is good. They've said that, the floggings and the executions of gays by throwing off the building, they've said these things are good, therefore they will be allowed to vote. It's almost like the North Korean-esque elections where, you have Kim Jong-un goes year after year, or not, probably not annually, but whatever it is, every 4 or 5 years, whatever it is, and his whole family has done this. Every single time there is an election, he stands and he allows everyone to vote. That sounds good, doesn't it? Men, women, as long as they're above, 18 or whatever, it's fine, isn't it? But he's the only one who runs. He is the only one who is actually allowed to run, and therefore not really an election. I mean, I'm not sure of the exact definition of an election, but I would imagine it's not that. I would imagine there is an element of choice there. I mean, I think the point of choice is if you have two choices and you take one away, you have no choices. There's a bizarre bit of maths there, but it works. So I don't know. It's all these tokenistic kind of little signs and symbols that the Middle East have been trying to give to the West to say that they're kind of modernizing and, we shouldn't have sanctions against them, and please allow us into the EU and all this kind of thing. Let our people go. Almost like Moses, let our people go to Europe. But, they don't really make much headway when it comes to the big things, like quelling terrorism or not executing gays or, just freeing women in general. Like not even little bits, but just in general. Just mind your own fucking business. Allow a woman to go about hers and leave her the fuck alone. Like, why is that? Like, it takes more effort to almost like in a 1984 kind of way, just constantly surveil your women, no pun intended, just watch them, make sure that they go about their business and they're 4 feet behind a man and they don't speak to anyone that they're not related to, and they've gotten the required permissions to exit the house from a man in the first place. And like, that takes so much more effort than just fucking not giving a shit. Like, why do you think the West is so successful? It's because we don't really give that much of a fuck. We're just not that nosy. We kind of keep ourselves to ourselves. We go about our business and we pay taxes and stuff. But like, that's kind of freedom, really. You do what you want or don't do what you want. Just stay and be a fucking hermit in your house. You have that option. But these kinds of places, these North Koreas, the Saudi Arabias, it's so fucking laborious. I mean, how did they find the effort to do that every day? Because it's not even like they live in a world where that's the norm. You can say that about the nation, but you can't say that about the world. Like, they have a direct comparison here in the West, in any other country they choose to compare themselves to, and they see how free we are. They see, like, all the things we can do, the things we have done, the innovated, discovered, explored, whatever metric system you care to compare us by. And they still don't realize that ultimately we probably have the common denominator of freedom. Like, these things that we're doing, all right, you haven't beaten us to them, but you may as well join us. I mean, it's working for us. It really is working for us. Capitalism, it's swell. It's done us proud, so much so that even Russia, Mother Russia herself, back in the 80s with the fall of the USSR and all that kind of thing, or was it early 90s? You had this move away from not only that collective sort of satellite state sort of policy, but also just in general communism. You don't, like, I was speaking to a friend of mine. She was saying that, like, she lives in Russia now. She says that people don't reference communism anymore. They don't talk about it. It's not they don't even acknowledge Russia as a communist state anymore. It's just not done. It's capitalism in all but name. They've given up. They've realized that the West has won. They know that we have had a drastic head start on them, but they're starting to be like us anyway, just to try and catch up. They're nationalizing their resources. They're selling it at exponential rates. They done well with all the resources, selling it to Europe and stuff, which has conversely really hurt them. What with the sanctions and stuff because of Crimea. But they don't refer to themselves as communists anymore. Like, no one, or very few people, actually want it. Like they're kind of ashamed of it, not as much as the, Germans are with the Nazis, but still they view it as an incorrect decision. And it's amazing to me that places like Saudi Arabia and North Korea still exist. I just wonder how long it will take them before they just give up and they go, you know what, fair fucks. I don't know why we're doing that for so long anyway. Let's just fucking start the game. But yeah, women were allowed to vote now in 2015. Maybe in 100 years they might actually be allowed out of the house unaccompanied. But fair fucks to them, I guess. Saying in the Middle East, kinda. To do with the Middle East, we have just a ridiculous story that kind of shows the lengths to which the migrant crisis has affected Europe. It says, Britain-bound trucker hangs raw pork off the outside of his lorry in an attempt to keep desperate Muslim migrants from stowing in the back. It said a hauler attached at least 4 sizable cuts of meat to the rear of his vehicle, and he did so in an attempt to keep desperate migrants from approaching the lorry. Pig flesh, particularly the eating of such, is strongly forbidden in Islam. Video of the truck was filmed waiting in Calais as it was heading to Britain. There's evidence and everything. There's the video. It shows the meat. Again, in a similar aspect to the previous story, I wonder what it'll take. What's the visual defining little bit of proof where someone goes, no, for fuck's sake, this is ridiculous. No, seriously, can we just stop? Can we do something about this? Yeah, so we have that story. We have Nigeria's Dasuki stole $2 billion from anti-Boko Haram fight. Nigeria's president, Muhammad Buhari, has ordered the arrest of his security advisor who allegedly stole more than $2 billion. That's not 2 billion of their dollars, by the way, whatever dollars they have, like that 2 billion, I don't know, fucking rubles. Although I know that's Russian or something. No, this is actual dollars. This is the dollars that matter. These aren't like the 1 trillion for a loaf of bread type dollars. This is 2 billion US dollars. Sambo Dasuki is accused of awarding phantom contracts to buy 12 helicopters, 4 fighter jets, and ammunition. He strongly denies the allegations. I'm not sure, again, I often wonder about when a story comes to this far, when it finally reaches a stage where it's being reported on, I would presume that there is more than enough evidence to make this accusation. Rumors that aren't true generally kind of fall to the wayside. What was that guy? This kind of proves my point. I can't even remember his name, but the Lord guy that was some people on Twitter, Sally Burko, and some people named him incorrectly as part of the whole 70s entertainer thing where old white guys were being, accused of being pedos and stuff. And his name was wrongly included in the list, but it got spread around quite a lot on Twitter. And so he fought back, as quite rightly, if he's wrongly accused of being something, it's a very serious allegation to make about someone. And he got it. He didn't get it removed, obviously, because of the internet. But he certainly fought back. He got an apology from the people who were influential in spreading it, the more followed is probably the word. But I think he was actually in a more ridiculous part of his lawsuit, trying to extract £1,000 from every single person who retweeted it, which clearly wasn't going to happen. But he firmly established that he wasn't part of it, or at least, that the person who accused him of being part of it, or the people, didn't have proof for him being in it. I don't know, maybe his name might crop up again. It's kind of, it remains to be seen. But he did put up a fair defense of, making sure that people knew he was saying that he wasn't one of them, and that in polite society, everyone is innocent until proven guilty. And it was a fairly unique case, what with the advent of the internet, where a man has actually managed to, sort of fight back against these allegations. Usually these things happen and they exist forever in perpetuity. A rumor exists about someone, like Richard Gere with the gerbil or something. It happens and it's forever associated with that person. It's really hard to get rid of. But I would imagine for the majority of times, when a story like this happens and it's reported by legitimate news services like the BBC, the chances are they have more than enough proof. It's not just some guy flinging shit going, oh, you see this guy, he's corrupt. No, everyone has opinions on politicians. Most people think that most politicians are corrupt, but unless you have specific dates and specific allegations and, you have evidence and all this kind of thing, they don't make it this far. So this fucking guy is saying, oh, I strongly deny the allegation. Well, I'm sure you do, but that's nothing. It means nothing. You most likely were doing this, let's face it. And also, the sad thing about this is that it just confirms everything that people, such as myself, have against foreign aid. When you talk about this kind of like this filtration system where you just, again, I think we in a previous podcast we spoke about the Italian government used to have a set percentage in their budget that was just assumed that it would be taken by La Cosa Nostra. They planned for it. They knew it through corruption and various different like business grants and things like that, and just outright extortion, it would be taken. And this type of shit just proves it for Africa as well. Why would anyone give money to them when you know for a fact they do shit like this? It's not even like a little bit of fucking pocket change. It's 2 fucking billion. How does that, like, when you're a dirt poor country and you're being given money by everyone else, wouldn't you account for every penny? How the fuck does 2 billion leave? That's almost more than your GDP. Like, how the fuck does it leave? How corrupt can you get where you don't even realize when 2 billion is missing from the coffers? It's fucking ridiculous. We have another story here. Apple apologizes after allegations of racism by Australia's schoolboys. Apple has apologized to 6 schoolboys. Apple has apologized to 6 schoolboys asked to leave one of their shops in Australia when what students described as a racist incident occurred. Footage of the incident at Melbourne's High Point shopping centre emerged on Tuesday, sparking a social media outcry. A staff member can be heard saying security are concerned that the boys will shoplift. Apple said the store manager apologized to the boys, who were all black, and their school principal. In a statement, the firm said, inclusion and diversity are among Apple's core values. We believe in equality for everyone, regardless of race, age, gender identity. Why is that a separate thing? Oh, yeah, I forgot. Because what you are isn't what you are. What you are is what you want to be. Yeah, I get that. Okay, gender identity, ethnicity, religion, or sexual orientation. That applies throughout our company, around the world, with no exceptions. We've looked into the details of the situation and we apologize to the customers involved. We will continue to do everything in our power to ensure that the customer, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a racist incident. It's a tricky one because it's all a very inferred story. It's all about like it kind of identifies who's leftist and who's on the right, in that people are very divided about it. It's like if you think that the guys would be the security store was being, or security members were being racist, I don't know if there's much proof for it. It's like there was no mention of race. There was no like, oh, you're black, therefore you'll steal. I think it's one of those things where it's almost paranoia on their part to assume that it was about race. In that, like, it's sort of the same thing about how you can't mention the word monk. Like, you can't say a black person is acting like a monkey, even if they actually are acting like a monkey. Like, you can't say, like, if a guy was jumping around or something, let's say you were a teacher, you wouldn't say, here, stop acting like a monkey. You can't say that because that would be like a racial incident or something. And yet you can say that about a white person. And in my opinion, that's the true racism. That is the difference. When you say one thing about one race, but you wouldn't say it about another, that is the racist thing. If you say it about both, then it doesn't really matter anymore. It's the definition of equality. If you can call kids that are jumping around a room or something, in a classroom, if you say stop acting like monkeys, that's fine. And it's kind of like here. We all know that for years, I mean, certainly all of my life, and I would imagine for, most of the life of the previous generation, corner shops have had, this two schoolboys or two school children at a time sign in the front of their shop. Now, why do they do that? It's specifically because of theft. It's the only reason. It's not a racist thing. It's just a numbers thing. It's like saying, well, it's only a mom and pop kind of shop. If you see with the rhyme, it's it's just me and the owl fella, and we can't keep an eye on everyone. Believe it or not, we don't want our stock to be robbed, so we have certain security precautions. We have, guess what? That camera in the corner, that's not a racist thing either. That's just there to prevent theft. This is our shop, we own it, we've bought it, we can do what we like with it, and if our policy is that we only have this amount of people in the shop at any one time, then you will abide by that or feel free to go somewhere else. It doesn't need to be inferred that it's a racist thing. It's if anything, it's an ageist thing. It's assuming that school kids are, more likely to thieve than anyone else. So I don't know, unless there's an actual racial accusation made there, like, fuck off, you black bastards or something, you're thieving pricks, then no, it's not. It's just, it's their policy. They don't want 6 school kids in a shop. And I think that's sort of their right. So, if you don't like it, feel free to vote with your wallet and don't go back again. Their business practices should reflect on their management. If they, if you don't like it, then enough people will agree with you and maybe they'll change it or they'll go bankrupt. Either way, they sort of live by the sword, as any person in a free capitalist society does. Okay, and we actually have an interview now with a guy by the name of David Longley, who's a UK comedian here who wrote a fairly interesting article. And joining me now is David Longley, a UK-based comedian. Now, David was in the news fairly recently for a blog that he wrote on his website, and it caught my eye because it was actually it was sort of very, what's the word? Cathartic almost. It was very interesting. It was a fairly unique perspective because the article dealt with being a UK comedian and touring for the last 12 years and, go around the comedy circuit and the receiving end, being on the receiving end of various sort of sexual harassments and assaults. And it was quite interesting because it was a very unique perspective. It's one I haven't really encountered before. You hear a lot about, women suffering various problems in the industry and stuff. And, to hear a man talk about these issues was actually quite courageous, in my opinion. So welcome to the show, David Longley.
Don't worry.
Yeah. So basically, there were various incidents catalogued in your article. It was a bit too long to go into here now, but there were some just off the top of my head where you were once harassed by 5 women who came up to you after a gig and, started commenting on your genitalia and saying, is that a cock or a sock? You had one woman who started to stroke your penis and testicles when you were on stage. And then she grabbed them so hard that they actually bruised, and she also spat on you.
Well, the spitting was more of an accident of her slurred, shouting, alcoholic-fueled speech. So it wasn't necessarily it was more of a like that kind of thing rather than a deliberate spit. But to be honest, it wouldn't have mattered. I was too busy worried about whether I'd be able to father children.
Yeah. The catalogue of incidents that you've been through is just amazing. You've had a man berating you from the crowd whilst he was masturbating.
Yes, I have. Yes, it's what's interesting about what I've written is that since I've written it, loads of text messages from fellow comics, loads of conversations with fellow comics. Very similar stories.
Really? Wow.
So, initially I thought it was, isolated incidents that I was very unlucky to be part of. But, having your cock grabbed is fairly... Well, it's too common. Let's put it that way. It's too common.
Yeah, I mean, it's... how do you deal with that as a comic? Sort of stopping the show mid-flow, so to speak, because it's tricky, isn't it? Because being a comedian is almost one of the only jobs where you sort of aren't really expected to deal with things seriously. So when someone, like, let's say that woman who started to grab her genitals, like, how do you deal with that in a sort of serious manner without actually, stopping the show dead, so to speak?
Well, it's going to depend on the situation. So the situation that I was discussing that involved me was a situation whereby I was just unable to do anything other than make a joke about it. And also, I want to point out, I'm not like mentally scarred by any of these issues, but it is something that has resonated with people in terms of how you would deal with it. And when it's on stage, there's kind of a breakdown of reality. So when you're on stage, people will shout things at you that ordinarily they would never shout at you. So they'll point out differences in your face. They'll say you got a big nose. They'll call you retarded. They'll say things that they would never normally say. So there's a slight barrier in terms of a realistic response. So on top of that, this woman probably in normal everyday life ordinarily would not go up to a complete stranger and grab their genitals. So you're kind of playing a balancing act in terms of, how do you keep the show going? How do you make sure that no one's upset? And how do you cope with your own feelings? And, it's a very, very different thing to being in normal life. So it's depend on each person. Comics on stage walk off in a huff for far less. I really respect for people who do that, because we're not supposed to tolerate those kind of things. But in terms of how I dealt with it, I just made a joke and carried on with my set, and tried to make it look like it didn't bother me, but it did.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing as well, because you're not just dealing with an individual or even a crowd of people. Sometimes, as detailed in your article, you will actually have people who are meant to be on your side kind of not necessarily go against you, but certainly not take you seriously. I mean, you've spoken about how promoters themselves, you've had promoters laugh along with the crowd, like when that woman grabbed you, like he was just laughing along, didn't bother stopping it, didn't do anything to sort of throw them out. Like how talk about the sort of the experience of, like, how do you decide whether or not something is serious enough to take to the next level, like, to either demand that the promoter throw them out, or even police, let's say, because it's quite tricky to sort of be taken seriously. I mean, these aren't common allegations, and there is a certain, obviously, bravado, a kind of confidence there, so it's not talked about from a male perspective that much.
No, and I think that the key word is the level of threat involved. That's the major difference. So I'm a pretty big guy. I'm 6'3" at the moment. I'm about 17 stone. I do martial arts. Pretty handy. So the level of threat I receive from perhaps a 5'4" woman who just happens to grab my genitals, I'm not in mortal danger. That's pretty much all she can do to me. So it might be debilitating, it might be embarrassing, but the level of threat isn't such that, which is again what I wrote in the article, is like, who's going to take that seriously? You go to the police and they'll say, well, why don't you just push her away? They're not going to take into account that I was on stage. So it is difficult in terms of being, you see, I don't like to frame things in terms of male and female. It's more about just be good to humans. That's the way I tend to look at it. So
do you think that there is a difference in the way that obviously things are dealt with? Because I mean, especially recently, with the whole I guess feminists call it rape culture, and Bill Cosby, and you now had just last week you had James Dean, the foremost male porn star. He had rape allegations against him. You have the whole Bill Cosby thing, and even over here in the UK, you have the whole 70s entertainer thing. Allegations from a female perspective are rife. It's very much in the kind of social consciousness at the moment. Do you think that there is a difference, though? I mean, between the two, in terms of how seriously people take them?
Well, my personal experience is there is a difference. There was just referring to me, there was a very clear difference between how the genders reacted. So almost every single woman who read the piece was incredibly sympathetic, incredibly empathetic, praised me for being brave and so on and so forth. The only woman who laughed was my wife, who then read it again and didn't laugh. And she said it was like reading another article. And whereas comedians will generally take the piss out of everything anyway. So I experienced a very different reaction dependent upon gender, although there were plenty of male comedians who took it very seriously. I think the advent of more and more women coming forward is that it's now being taken seriously. So use the great example of 70s entertainers. For a while, it was just part of the culture that there was a sexist culture. So now that's obviously not true. It's not frowned upon. You know, we've made so much progress that women can feel that they will that they can come forward and be taken seriously. But you know, I've got 3 female friends who've been raped, and they've never taken it anywhere. They've never gone further with it because it's too emotionally upsetting, and it's he said, she said. So it ends up being in a position where so what I consider happened to me to be very low level, and what happened to my friends who've been raped is very high level. It's like the worst thing. And they didn't take it further because they felt it would not that they wouldn't be taken seriously, but what was the end game? The end game was, I think he raped me, and he'll say, I didn't rape you, and that. So you get to a point where, I mean, for me personally, I don't subscribe to the idea of a rape culture. There's a rape culture in prison, but to suggest that the United Kingdom has a all-encompassing rape culture, I find a little bit disingenuous. And also, every time I read an article about rape culture, they change the definition of it to suit the crux of the article. But in terms of being taken seriously, people will either take me seriously or they won't. You know, one of the things I've enjoyed most about the response to the article is that my 2 favorite responses have been a comedian saying to me that they knew it was a piss take from the second they started reading it, and another person in comedy saying to me, I thought it was, and as soon as I started reading it, I knew it was serious. So there's an inherent ambiguity to being a comedian and writing about something serious, and that's.
I think you did all you can though in the article itself. I mean, there is, I think the first 3 paragraphs of it are you explicitly stating that it isn't a joke. It's absolutely serious, and you know, it's not facetious at all. But it's interesting that you mentioned sort of rape culture and the accusations and things like that, because there is I guess a slight shift in the way that sexism as a whole has been experienced, because as you mentioned, it used to be, you know, systematic almost in the 70s and things like that. You know, that we're hearing the salacious details and things like that almost every week now. You know, some new detail comes out and it's like worse than the one before. And I think that in as much as it used to be systematic that if you were a woman and you did have some sort of sexual assault and you went to the police and sort of spoke to them and wanted to take it further, you were systematically not believed. You were outright encouraged to, you know, kind of redact it, or this guy's too famous, maybe you should just go back down and stuff. But I agree with you in the sense that I don't think nowadays in modern society there is a rape culture. I think, if anything, it's kind of shifted to the opposite end of the spectrum, in the sense that when a woman makes an allegation now, it's almost outright believed, you know, which in my opinion is as bad as it being outright unbelieved. You know, I think that there is a sort of Goldilocks zone there where a woman can make an allegation, and through the process of, you know, justice and going through the courts and things like that you can discern the truth. But I think that believing a woman instantly is as harmful as not believing her straight away. I think she should be given the benefit of the doubt. And, you know, the process of law enforcement and evidence collecting and things like that should be, you know, it should be sort of, well, law. It, you know, it should be the way that we do things.
Yeah, the presumption of innocence something that's supposed to be enshrined, and it's supposed to be something that's taken very seriously. And to a certain extent, I mean, the James Dean case is very interesting because here is where I test your porn knowledge. Have you heard of a pornography performer by the name of Cytherea?
I have indeed.
Good. I'm glad that you are familiar with her work. Were you aware that she was gang raped this year?
I wasn't, to be honest.
No. She had a home invasion by 3 gentlemen, using the term loosely. She was held at gunpoint and forced to perform various sex acts on the gentlemen as they gang raped her. And
did they know who she was? Was it like a targeted thing, or was it just like a home invasion?
It was a targeted attack. They knew exactly who she was, where she lived, and what they wanted her to do, and it was all based on things that she'd done in the films. Jeez. She came forward. She's got a couple of YouTube videos about it where she thanked everybody for the support. She went through the whole process of giving samples of her body so that they could regain the fluid. They caught the perpetrators. She was very stoic in the face of this horrible violation. And I found out about it from a blog that a friend sent me where the guy who wrote it was basically saying, why is this woman not being held up as a feminist icon? She's been the bravest person in the light of a most horrendous crime possible, and she's given evidence, and these guys are going to do jail time. So nobody's heard about that. However, James Dean, who was kind of the poster boy for the modern acceptance of porn, has an allegation made against him. Now he's been ostracized, and he's essentially been, as you said before, the presumption of guilt is one that is prevalent rather than the presumption of innocence.
Yeah, I think it's actually more than one, though. In fairness, I think it's close to 7 or 8 allegations now from different women. Various ones stepping forward and saying, right, being very specific with dates and events. From what I've heard, I think there has been no comment from his side as of yet. I think he posted something on Twitter or something, basically saying that the allegations were, of course, untrue. But yeah, I think it's a very dicey game, when an allegation happens, because it's believing them too much, I think, is as bad as just not believing them at all. So they should be taken seriously. Everything should be catalogued, but there is still the rule of law, and as you said, the presumption of innocence in a civilized society. So, I mean, just to sort of finish the interview now, like, just one last question. What do you think personally needs to change in the industry here in the UK, for things like this to be taken more seriously? Because, as you know, the comedian Sarah Pascoe has set up, along with various other promoters and comedians, I think it was the first comedy guild here in the UK. This was earlier on this year, and so they're basically going to fight for better wages and better standards and things like that. In your own opinion, like, what would you like to see changed?
I don't know that there's. Ideally, I'd like people to respect other people's space and not be such pricks. I mean, look, the bottom line is that there is a difference in how I am on stage and how a female is on stage. So a female will feel a degree of threat from a man saying something that I wouldn't necessarily feel from a woman saying something to me. Now, that's not to say that I've been attacked by women at gigs, and I've seen bouncers have to drag them out as they made a beeline for the stage. But again, it's this level of threat. So generally, on the whole, I mentioned this, like 99% of the time, everything's fine. But what needs to change is, what I would like to see change is the insistence on getting people pissed at comedy gigs. That seems to be the thing that lowers inhibitions and makes choices, and the decision making is inhibited as a result of having too much alcohol, which is fueled by the environment in which comedy is performed on a weekend basis. So
yeah, it's tricky as well, because it's one of those things that's so intertwined that you can almost barely imagine such a system existing where comedy is performed strictly to a sober audience in, let's say, an event hall that is based on just performing alone, that doesn't have some kind of bar at the back or pub in the front or below or something like that. So it is tricky, because a comedy for years has been a sort of, I guess, a byproduct of, landlords and things like that wanting to make a bit of extra cash by renting out a room or something like that. So by its very nature, it was always very intertwined. It was hard for it to stand on its own two legs because there wasn't much of an audience. But do you think going forward that is a realistic expectation that, perhaps one day could actually morph into its own pure comedy clubs without alcohol?
No, I don't think it's a realistic expectation at all. I don't think that would ever happen. One of the reasons why I can perhaps get away with some of the material that I use is because people's inhibitions are lower. So therefore, I want them to have lower inhibitions in terms of what they are perhaps willing to laugh at. But I don't want their inhibitions to be so low that they are willing to shout sexually aggressive slurs at comedians that are on stage, or go up to them afterwards and feel like they can touch them without permission. For me, it's all about the level of aggression. And so people can be very tactile and be very friendly with it, and there's nothing behind it. But there have been, again, it's not just me, this is other comedians who've shared things with me since I wrote the article. A lot of comedians have felt physically threatened by members of the audience as a direct result of something they said on stage.
You've been slapped by a woman for refusing her offer of sex, and she accused you of, quote, fanny teasing. I mean, you've actually gone through it yourself. It's you've been, again, the difference between, I guess, tactile, as you say, but then when it actually comes to physical assault, I mean, surely in a purely equal society they would be held accountable, and it's not like you almost have a duty, I guess, to kind of report these people to make sure that it doesn't happen to future people, that they get remonstrated correctly by the police or whoever it is. I mean, another incident you've had, a woman rubbing her breasts on you as you waited in the back of the room to go up for a gig. I mean, you say last week a woman stroked your face, pinched your nipple, and talked dirty to you.
Yeah. Again, you could argue that this isn't a new thing, and maybe we just didn't hear about it as much before, or maybe people didn't talk about it, or I mean, there's another thing that I've perhaps not touched on, is that like 90% of male comedians are good, upstanding husbands and boyfriends, but there's a small minority that will get their end away at any opportunity. And maybe this woman was just trying to look, and maybe a few other times it's worked, and if we're going to have the same sort of I think what you're saying is correct, is that the rules are the rules, so everybody should abide by them. But one of the thrilling aspects of sexual attraction and sexual conduct is the ambiguity of it. That's why it's so exciting. So she might have come up, stroked my face, tweaked my nipple, and said and said all kinds of dirty things to me, and I might have responded absolutely as she wanted, and bang, we're in a car in the car park and everything's go.
Yeah.
But her gambit was one that failed. So am I to assume that she is in some way assaulting me, or some way being harassing towards me? I mean, I don't know. It's going to depend on the individual. I mean, I'm quite a sensitive soul, so maybe there is a good argument I'm being a little bitch. I mean, that's a good argument, but
no, I think it is a fair point. It's very dicey, because where do you draw the line on a kind of social sense? Like, if you're at a certain point, when sometimes you hear these feminists, like these extreme ones and stuff, they talk about how everything is rape. Like there was a case in America about a woman who was suing a man because he raped her with his eyes. They were sitting across, I think, on a subway or something, and he just looked at her, maybe even looked at her, lasciviously, and was probably interested or something like that, but didn't even talk to her, didn't physically assault her or anything, just apparently raped her with his eyes. And you wonder, sometimes you think about like a dystopian future somewhere where people are truly desexualized, like some sort of Orwellian abolish the orgasm type society, where you wonder, how will anyone ever be able to chat up another person, be they men or women? How will they approach the opposite member of sex? Because everything seems to be demonized. So I think that is a fair point. There is like a Goldilocks zone again where you have to kind of be able to approach someone, but it is obviously, there is a communal sense of being appropriate and what is not.
Yeah, which is what gets to the sort of the point really, is that most people don't take a lot of this stuff seriously.
Yeah.
So that woman you hear about he raped me with he raped me with his eyes. That's clickbait. The only reason you know about that is because it's shown up on a website. That's going to get thrown out of a criminal court. It will be a lawyer who's an ambulance chaser, and he's just after a quick settlement. So there's that element of American law, which is very, very it's just dirty. It's like if we can get a test case, we can make some money. So there's that side of it. But and for me, comedically, I'm at work, so the rules are blurred a little bit. So when I worked in care, I worked in care for 10 years. And the majority of the staff were female. Very clear lines about appropriate and inappropriate, and that's a workplace. So Charlotte Proudman, are you aware of that name?
No. Who is she?
She was the barrister who her LinkedIn profile was sent to.
Oh yeah, I know the one you're about. Sorry, I didn't know her name, but I know the case. Yeah.
Complimented her on her photograph, and you had two very distinct sides. There were, oh come on, it's just a compliment, and there was, how dare he be so sexist. It wasn't one or the other. It was an inappropriate time to make a comment on physical appearance because it was done within a professional setting.
Yeah. So
it wasn't old school sexism. Maybe it was, but I don't think it was old school sexism. I just think it was, you know what, mate, you picked the wrong time here. And her reaction was perhaps a little bit excessive, but I think she was right to call him out, but not necessarily publicly, because she then has gone on to try and build up a media profile and a job off the back of it. And that touches on another thing which is very interesting, the victimhood status. There is now a status in being a victim, which is something I wanted to sort of steer clear from, because I don't feel like a victim at all. I don't feel like I've been brave. I don't feel like a victim. I just wrote something and didn't realise it would get the response it did. But there is a sort of inherent celebrity in being a victim now, which is very interesting in popular culture.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. It feeds into that whole, that kind of safe space mentality where, young people now, especially university goers and things like that, they're finding it hard to comprehend reality to a certain extent. They can't really... They can't tolerate offense for what it is, and they can't really put it in proportion and realize that maybe people have different opinions to them, and through debate we'll all kind of get more educated together, and we'll kind of refine the right answer to any given question. And so now you have everyone kind of suing everyone getting safe spaces, and it seems like it is just breeding a weaker type of person, really. Like, that it breeds that victimhood mentality. And it's almost like, as you said, people are becoming celebrities now because of the victimhood.
Yeah, I think, there's an interesting thing that's happened biologically to men over the last sort of 40 years. Are you aware that testosterone levels have dropped over the last few generations of men?
I was indeed. I think I read the exact same article that, you're on about now.
Well, I'm interested in this going to weightlifting and all kinds of macho nonsense, and but one of the things that comes out of that is an understanding of your place in the world. So when you lift a weight, you either lift it or you don't, and that's struggle, and you learn something about yourself. So I do a martial art called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and you grapple with someone, and if they beat you, you learn something about yourself. And it's this, what's happened over the last few years is testosterone levels have dropped. That might be linked with the spate of suicides that are happening for men between 18 and 35. It's all linked in to a shift in the culture. Now, whether that shift is good or bad is going to be decided upon in 40 years' time. We might look back in 40 years' time and go, Jesus, man, what bitches? Why didn't they sort that out? But too late. We're all walking around as eunuchs.
So, Dave, it's been a good interview. Thank you for coming on the show. It's been very informative. I know you don't, as you said, you don't like to be considered brave or whatever, but I can't help but feel it. But fair fucks to you for writing it. I mean, I think it needs to be said. It was certainly a fairly unique perspective, and I think that in a sort of truly equal society, it's not, again, it's not really about men or women. It's just about this kind of being treated as equal. These allegations need to be taken as equally as seriously as women's are and stuff. And generally, we can kind of all move forward together with it. So yeah, fair play to you for writing it. Thanks for coming on the show, David.
No worries.
All right, all the best. Take care.
Cheers, man. Take care.
Okay, and so we're gonna finish the podcast now for this episode with a fairly interesting thing I saw this week. It's weird. I can't believe I haven't seen this before, but Michael, would you like to hear Hitler's ordinary speaking voice? Not the ranty, shouty, podium in front of loads of people going out, like that kind of thing, but the kind of just ordinary, monotone, really bizarrely deep-voiced Hitler. Would you like to hear that?
No.
All right, well then I guess that's that. See you next week, people. No, of course, we're going to fucking do it. This, just to set it up, this is Hitler speaking normally to, I think it's the Finnish defense minister. I think he was trying to negotiate something there. I don't know if he's trying to take them over or if he was trying to get them to join in his fight. I don't know. But yeah, just listen to Hitler's ordinary speaking voice. It's bizarrely deep. I didn't expect it to be this deep, to be honest. So obviously speaking German. He's the subtitles there. That's the other guy, that's the Finnish guy. Mannerheim is his name.
Und jetzt ist ihm gar kein Zweifel, was sie hatten in ihren Schienen.
This is it.
Sie haben die ungeheuerste Rüstung, die Menschen denkbar ist. Also,
He's talking about Russia's armaments.
Ein Staat
Stalin. By the way, this was gotten by, I think, a doctor who worked in service for Hitler, who was in the room at the time and managed to get this recording by sneaking it. Like, he had a recorder in his briefcase or something, and he got this at threat of death, by the way. If he'd have been caught doing this, executed immediately. Well, probably not immediately in front of Hitler, but, take it outside and execute it. But yeah, I just, the fucking balls on this guy. It's the only recorded example of Hitler's ordinary speaking voice. We have the podium stuff, the rants and all that kind of thing. This is the only one. It's unbelievable.
Wenn mir jemand gesagt hätte, dass ein Staat mit 35.000 Punks antreten kann, dann hätte ich gesagt, sie sind Wahnsinn. 35.000 Panzer. Wir haben zurzeit über 34.000 Panzer vernichtet. Wenn mir das jemand gesagt hätte, ich hätte gesagt, wenn ein General von mir erklärt hätte, dass...
It almost sounds like a different person, doesn't it? Yeah, so there you go. The more you learn. Yeah, so with a bit of Hitler, we will finish this episode. And thank you for listening. So just a bit of business. We have still the email address if you want to send us in anything. Videos, pictures, topics, stories, articles, anything. If you want us to try and get a hold of someone for an interview, as you just heard. We'll probably want to do more of those as well. So, do feel free to recommend someone you feel that merits an interview. So, realistically speaking, come on. Don't go fucking recommending George Clooney or something. I probably won't be able to get him. So, yeah, the Strike Show @hotmail.com for any submissions. Do be sure to click the PayPal link below if you want to donate. A penny or £1 million, completely up to you. And then, yeah, I think that is it. That will do it for this. Oh, yeah, thank you to Whack for hosting us again. So with that, we shall bid you adieu. I've been Sean Hartnett.